Winter's breath clung to the windows of Ashbourne Hall like frostwoven lace, and within its ballroom the season's brightest figures glittered beneath the chandeliers. Music swelled, violins trembling as though afraid to disturb the gossip that hummed between jeweled fans. The Duchess of Ashbourne, Lady Evelyn Whitmore, stood at the center of that brilliance, luminous yet isolated, her gown of pale ivory shining like a wound stitched in silk. 5 years of marriage had taught her composure, so absolute it appeared divine. She smiled when addressed, bowed when expected, and laughed with the measured cadence of obligation. Yet beneath the perfection of lace gloves her hands were cold, the blood slowed by disappointment too long endured. The Duke, her husband, entered late, his arrival slicing through conversation like a blade. Tall, severe, impeccable in black velvet, he carried authority that drew eyes instinctively downward. Whispers followed him. The Duke who once rode with the Prince, the man who never forgave weakness. He paused upon the marble stair, gaze sweeping the room until it found his wife. For a fleeting instant something human flickered in his expression, then hardened to glass. "Your Grace," said Sir Allington with a smirk meant to curry favor, "the Duchess seems eager for your dance." The Duke's reply traveled farther than discretion allowed. "My wife's eagerness is an illusion much like her health. I would not risk dullness." A ripple of shocked delight passed through the crowd. Laughter, polite, poisonous, followed. Evelyn inclined her head, the practiced motion of a woman who bleeds inwardly. "Then allow me, your Grace," murmured the young widow, Mrs. Reynard, stepping forward with the innocence of a serpent. The Duke offered his arm. Together they moved to the floor, and the orchestra obeyed his signal, striking the first notes of a waltz that felt like judgment. Evelyn's vision blurred with candlelight and humiliation. Every spin of their bodies before her was an accusation, barren, unwanted, decorative. Yet she did not flee. She lifted her glass instead, the wine trembling only once before steadiness reclaimed it. At the edge of the hall a stranger watched, tall, dark-haired, his attire marked by travel rather than fashion. Lord Lucian Harrow, the Duke's distant cousin, recently returned from Vienna after years of rumored exile. His gaze upon the Duchess was not pity, it was recognition, as if he alone saw the invisible fracture beneath her calm. Outside, snow began to fall, soft, uninvited, purer than anything within those walls. When the music ended, applause echoed like thunder over a battlefield. The Duke bowed to his partner, then brushed past his wife without acknowledgement. Conversation resumed, forced, frantic, feeding on scandal. Evelyn moved to the balcony for air. Behind her, the laughter of the ballroom softened into a blur, replaced by the hush of winter night. She pressed a hand to the balustrade. The marble was so cold it burned. Somewhere below, horses stamped and carriages groaned, impatient to depart. From a doorway came a quiet voice. "My lady, should you remain so near the frost, it will think you one of its own." She turned. The stranger bowed, the gesture respectful yet intimate, as though he feared even courtesy might harm her. "You presume much, sir," she said, tone even. "Forgive me," he answered. "I presume only that no heart deserves to be humiliated in public view." His words were bold, dangerously so, but carried no trace of ridicule. He spoke as one wounded, not as a witness seeking amusement. Evelyn's reply was delayed by pride. "You mistake what you saw for cruelty. It was merely society's entertainment." "Then society is poorer for its taste," he murmured. The orchestra within struck a livelier tune, laughter swelling again. Evelyn's composure threatened to waver. The stranger's gentleness felt perilous precisely because it asked nothing. "Your name, sir?" she demanded, though she already suspected. "Lucian Harrow." The syllables hung between them like a confession. Somewhere in the hall a door opened. The Duke's voice called for servants. Evelyn drew a sharp breath and lowered her veil. "You should not speak to me again, Lord Harrow." "Then I shall content myself with silence," he said, though silence is rarely merciful. She stepped past him, the faintest tremor betraying her restraint. Inside, The air had grown hotter, thicker with perfume and pretense. Yet when she reached her chamber that night, a single white rose awaited upon her dressing table, dew still, glistening along its petals as though stolen from the frozen dawn. Opening shame, Part 2, almost equals 500 words. Sleep evaded her. The rose lay beside the mirror, a fragile miracle mocking her resolve. Its scent, faint clean, impossible in winter, stirred memories she had long buried. The first spring of her marriage, when the Duke had laughed once, just once, beneath an apple tree before duty consumed him. Evelyn touched the stem and found no thorns. Whoever had placed it knew both courage and caution. In the east corridor, a clock tolled 2. Below, the household rested under the Duke's iron discipline. She alone remained awake, a prisoner of civility. The wind pressed against the windows, demanding entry. She almost envied its freedom. From the courtyard came the muffled sound of hooves departing, one rider unaccompanied. She went to the window and saw only darkness pierced by a lantern's brief glow. For a moment she thought she glimpsed him, the stranger, turning his face upward as though aware of her gaze. Then the light vanished into snow. Morning arrived brittle and bright. The servants avoided her eyes. Rumor, swift as frost, had already begun to spread. Mrs. Reynard's laughter carried through the breakfast hall, and the Duke read his correspondence without greeting. "Did you enjoy the ball, my lady?" he asked at last, voice like the crack of ice. "It was a triumph of taste," she answered softly. He looked up then, measuring the calm in her tone, searching for fracture. Whatever he found displeased him. See that it remains so. Ashbourne's dignity must not be questioned. Her spoon paused above untouched tea. Dignity, your grace, requires witnesses who believe in it. His eyes narrowed. Take care, madam. Even marble can be broken. He rose, the scent of his cologne lingering, a blend of authority and absence, and left her in silence. The day dragged beneath the weight of unspoken things. Snowlight filled the corridors, turning portraits pale and ghostly. Evelyn wandered through them as though through a mausoleum of expectations. In the music room, she found the white rose had been moved. It now rested atop the piano, precisely centered, as if displayed for judgment. On the sheet music beneath it, a faint smear of ash formed the shape of a fingerprint. For the first time in years, fear stirred in her, not of discovery but of awakening. Whoever had sent the flower had seen her humiliation and dared to offer beauty where cruelty reigned. As dusk descended, she lit no lamps. The house dimmed around her, its silence alive with speculation. Somewhere beyond those walls, perhaps in exile once more, a man carried the scent of roses in the snow. Evelyn closed her eyes. For the briefest instant she imagined warmth, a dance unmocked, a gaze unjudged. Then the moment passed, and composure reclaimed her like armor clasped too tightly. Yet when the maid entered to draw the curtains, she gasped. Another white rose lay upon the windowsill, fresh, glistening, impossible still. Morning sunlight fell pale upon Ashbourne's marble floors, glancing off gilt mirrors and chandeliers that had witnessed more cruelty than affection. The Duke had departed early for London, leaving behind the silence that followed his presence like an obedient servant. For the first time in months, the Duchess breathed freely, though freedom in that house always felt like theft. In the stillness of the breakfast salon, Evelyn found the white rose once again, this time folded within a sealed envelope upon her silver tray. Her name, Evelyn, written not with the cold hand of formality, but with an intimacy that trembled. She hesitated, every instinct trained by fear, yet curiosity, that reckless sibling of loneliness, prevailed. Inside was a small pressed violet and a single line. Beauty, when silenced, must learn to whisper through the petals of defiance. No signature, no claim, only that haunting ink smelling faintly of smoke and rain. Her heart betrayed her with a sudden ache, a feeling both dangerous and alive. She tucked the note within her prayer book, though prayer felt like a language she had long forgotten. By midday, the estate had begun to stir with preparations for the Duke's winter hunt. Guests would arrive by week's end, lords, widows, and whispers alike. Ashbourne thrived on spectacle, and Evelyn's humiliation was its most beloved entertainment. She resolved to appear composed, flawless, untouchable. If her husband sought to erase her spirit, she would answer with elegance sharper than his cruelty. Yet the rose changed everything. Later that afternoon, she ventured into the conservatory, its glass walls veiled with frost. The scent of damp earth and camellia filled the air, a breath of life amid so much repression. She was not alone. Lucian Harrow stood beside the fountain, the light behind him turning his figure into a chiaroscuro of shadow and silver. His gloves were off, his hand tracing the rim of a marble basin where a lone petal floated. "You have a talent for appearing where propriety frowns most," she said quietly. He turned, that same measured gentleness in his gaze. "Then I am in good company, your grace." Her lips parted in warning, yet no word followed. The faintest smile ghosted across his mouth. "Why," she managed, "do you persist in observing me?" "Because," he replied, "it seems no one else dares to see you." His words struck like confession. Around them, the soft drip of melting ice sounded almost like a heartbeat. Evelyn's composure faltered. "Your sympathy will only bring ruin to us both." "Then let it come," he said simply. "Ruin, after all, is but honesty exposed." Before she could answer, a sudden clatter startled them, the sound of footsteps, laughter. Lady Reynard entered, a vision of crimson silk and malice disguised as charm. "Oh," she exclaimed, feigning surprise. "Your Grace, Lord Harrow. What a rare sight. I did not realize the conservatory held such devotion to horticulture." Her eyes flicked between them, gathering scandal like a vulture sensing carrion. Evelyn's pulse quickened, yet she remained serene. "Lord Harrow was merely admiring the Duke's roses," she said evenly. Lady Reynard's smile deepened. "Indeed, one wonders how many thorns he has encountered." Lucian bowed unshaken. "Only enough to learn their worth." When the widow left, her laughter lingered bright and cruel. The Duchess exhaled slowly. "You have given her a weapon." "Let her wield it," Lucian replied. "Truth fears no tongue, though lies often fear a single glance." She turned away, unwilling to meet that gaze again. The air between them burned with everything neither dared name. That evening, the first sparks of gossip lit the drawing rooms like kindling. Servants whispered of the Duchess's secret meetings, of roses found where roses could not grow. A misplaced letter, perhaps planted, perhaps stolen, appeared upon the Duke's desk before his return. He arrived sooner than expected. The carriage thundered through the courtyard at dusk, horses snorting clouds of fury. The household stiffened. When he entered, snow clung to his coat, his eyes darker than the storm outside. Evelyn was in the parlor, reading by firelight when the door flung open. "Whose hand delivers you roses in my house?" he demanded. Her book closed with quiet precision. "Perhaps one who remembers that I am human." The Duke's nostrils flared. "Do not test me, Evelyn. You live by my name, my fortune, my mercy." "Then I pity you," she said, her voice trembling not with fear, but something sharper. "For any man who must remind a woman of his power has already lost it." He stepped forward. "You forget yourself. And you," she whispered, "forget what love once required." For a moment, silence. Then his hand swept across the mantel, sending the vase of lilies crashing to the floor. "You shame me before my own blood," he hissed. Evelyn rose, dignity wrapped around her like armor. "You shamed yourself when you made cruelty your companion." Their standoff was broken by a servant's hesitant knock. "Your Grace, Lord Harrow has returned. He awaits you in the study." The Duke's glare sharpened. How convenient. He left without another word. Evelyn stood motionless, the shattered lilies bleeding fragrance across the rug. In the hours that followed, the house trembled with unseen tempests. Voices murmured beyond doors, low, strained, masculine. Then silence. When Lucian finally emerged, his cheek bore a faint bruise, his expression unreadable. Evelyn found him by chance in the corridor. "He knows," she said. Lucian shook his head. He suspects, but suspicion is often blinder than truth. Then leave, before he turns that blindness into rage. He hesitated. And leave you alone among wolves? I have been alone among them for 5 years. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Then allow one wolf to stand between you and the pack. Something broke within her then, not entirely pain, not entirely hope. She turned away, but he caught her hand gently, pressing into her palm a small object, a token smooth and cold. When she opened her hand, she found a silver pendant in the shape of a rosebud. A promise, he said softly, for when the frost breaks. She wanted to refuse it, yet her fingers closed around it of their own will. The next morning, servants discovered Lady Reynard fainted in the garden, clutching a crumpled note bearing the Duchess's seal. By noon, the whispers became accusations. The Duke summoned witnesses, and the corridors filled with the rustle of judgment. Evelyn stood before them all, still, pale, untouchable, as letters were read aloud, their ink twisted into scandal. Her heart pounded, but her gaze did not waver. When the Duke demanded to know if she denied affection for Lord Harrow, she replied, "I deny only the shame others wish me to feel." Gasps rippled through the hall. The Duke's fury was magnificent, his control fraying. "Then you will answer to society for your defiance," he thundered. "I already have," she said quietly, and before he could speak again, Lucien entered the doorway, his eyes steady, his coat marked by travel, his silence heavy with intent. In his hand gleamed another white rose, dew clinging to its petals like tears that refused to fall. Evelyn's breath caught. The room froze. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the moors as though heaven itself had drawn its breath. The storm did not cease for 3 days. It lashed against the windows of Ashbourne Hall with a ferocity that seemed heaven's echo of human sin. The Duke had departed for London again, under the guise of business, though every servant knew it was fury that drove him from the house. Evelyn remained confined within its cold grandeur, the object of whispered pity and concealed delight. The scandal had not destroyed her, though it had tried. Instead, it hollowed the silence around her, leaving only the faint heartbeat of defiance. The Duchess sat by her dressing table that evening, the silver pendant resting in her palm. It caught the firelight, glowing like a secret half-confessed. She had not seen Lucien since the confrontation, though his presence haunted every corridor, every shadow where she dared imagine warmth. A soft knock came upon her door. Her maid hesitated, eyes wide. "My lady, Lord Harrow requests a word. He insists it is urgent." For a moment, Evelyn could not speak. Then, calm, practiced, admit him. Lucien entered quietly, his cloak damp with rain, his hair disheveled from the storm. He looked like a man torn between duty and desire, his restraint worn thin by the cost of silence. "You should not have come," she began, but her voice lacked conviction. He bowed slightly. "Then forgive me for needing to breathe." The air between them was electric, charged with everything propriety forbade. The fire crackled, throwing amber light upon their faces, hers pale and composed, his shadowed with regret. "I leave for Vienna tomorrow," he said softly. "The Duke has made his wishes clear. I am no longer welcome upon English soil." Her fingers tightened around the pendant. "You came to tell me this?" "I came," he said, stepping closer, "because leaving without seeing you once more would make exile a mercy." She turned away, her heart hammering so loudly she feared he could hear it. "You risk ruin by standing here." "I risk nothing that has not already been taken," he said. "They've stripped me of name, reputation, inheritance, but they cannot strip me of truth." She faced him then, and for the first time her composure cracked. "And what truth is worth such ruin?" His voice lowered to a tremor. "That I love you." The words fell between them like a confession, at an altar, irreversible, sacred, and damning all at once. Evelyn drew in a sharp breath. The storm outside seemed to still, as though the world itself waited for her answer. "You cannot speak so," she whispered. "Not here. Not to me." "Then to whom?" he asked. "To the ghosts who watch us rot incivility? To a world that measures worth by obedience?" Her throat ached with the effort to resist him. "You do not understand. Love is not my freedom, it is my sentence. Every affection I have ever given has become a weapon against me." Lucian took another step, slow, reverent. "Then let this be the only affection that defends you." For a long moment neither spoke. The rain softened, a steady murmur like breath shared between two fates. At last she said, almost trembling, "Do you think I have not imagined it? That I have not dreamt in sleepless nights of being seen, not as a title or ornament, but as a woman?" Her voice broke, soft as silk torn in the dark. "But I am bound, Lucian. Every vow I took, though forced, still lives in the eyes of God and society." He bowed his head. "Then I will not ask you to break them. Only to remember that once, in this life, you were not unseen." Her tears came silently, catching light like shards of crystal. She turned her face away, ashamed of what they revealed. He reached forward, not to touch, but to offer his hand, palm upward, a gesture ancient and chivalrous. "May I speak plainly, without the world listening?" She nodded. "I was there," he said, "the day your marriage was announced. I watched as the Duke took your hand before the Queen and smiled the smile of a man acquiring land. And I swore, silently, that if ever I could stand between you and despair, I would. The vow was foolish, perhaps, but tonight it feels like the only truth I've ever known." Evelyn stared at him, unable to move. "You speak as though your pain were greater than mine." "No," he replied, "only shared." He drew from his coat a small velvet box and placed it upon her table. Inside lay a ring, plain, silver, unadorned. "It belonged to my mother. She wore it until her death, and my father buried her without it. I kept it not as inheritance, but as remembrance. Take it not as promise, but as protection." She shook her head. "If I keep it, I condemn us both." "Then let it condemn me," he said quietly. "I have lived long enough in cowardice." Their eyes met. In that single glance existed more honesty than years of vows and etiquette combined. She closed the box with trembling fingers. "Lucian," she said at last, "if I were brave, I would beg you to stay. But if I am wise, I must let you go." He smiled, a small, tragic curve of the lips. Wisdom has never written a single love story worth remembering. They both laughed then, softly, painfully, the sound of souls recognizing themselves. When he moved to leave, she stopped him with a whisper. "Wait." He turned, hope flickering. She stepped forward, closer than propriety allowed. "Before you go, tell me, was it you who left the roses?" He met her gaze. "Every one." Something inside her gave way. She reached out, fingers brushing his hand, their first and only touch. It was nothing, a mere breath of contact, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 unsaid words. The door creaked. They froze. Her maid's voice frightened. "My lady, the Duke's carriage has returned." Evelyn's breath hitched. He was not due until morning. Lucian's eyes hardened with decision. Then this must end. "No," she said, panic breaking through decorum. "If he finds you here?" He caught her hand again, urgent now. "If he finds me here, let him. I would rather face his wrath than leave without the truth between us." Her heart pounded as footsteps echoed down the corridor. She looked at him one final time, his face illuminated by firelight, calm amid ruin. "Go," she whispered. "Please." He hesitated, then pressed his lips to her knuckles, the touch reverent as prayer. "If I die for this moment, it will have been worth life itself." He vanished into the shadows, just as the Duke's voice thundered beyond the door. Evelyn turned toward the mirror, her reflection pale and resolute. The silver pendant gleamed against her throat, catching the glow of dying embers. Outside, thunder rolled once more across the moors, and with it came the sound of hooves approaching fast. She whispered into the darkness, not as plea, but as vow. "Let them call it scandal. I shall call it truth." The Duke's arrival shattered the fragile calm of Ashbourne like thunder splitting glass. Hooves thundered through the courtyard, carriage wheels grinding against frozen stone. Within moments, servants scattered like frightened birds. The air itself seemed to recoil from his fury. Evelyn stood in her chamber, every heartbeat echoing through her throat. The scent of rain and Lucien's nearness still clung to her. The fire had dimmed, leaving the room bathed in trembling shadows. Her hand tightened around the pendant as if it were both armor and confession. A fist struck the door. "Evelyn!" His voice, controlled, but only just, sent a chill through her spine. She turned, spine straight, and said calmly, "Enter." The door opened. The Duke stood there, tall, immaculate despite the storm, his coat glistening with rain. He looked less like a man than a judgment made flesh. "I have returned to my home," he said, "only to find whispers before me. Shall I be told what serpent has found refuge beneath my roof?" "Perhaps," she replied evenly, "it is the serpent who built the roof." His eyes narrowed. "You forget your place." "I have lived only by remembering it," she said. "Tonight I choose to forget." He stepped closer, the air between them heavy with restrained violence. "Do not provoke me, Evelyn. Not tonight. You have tested the limits of my patience and of this marriage." Her lips trembled, but not with fear. "This marriage," she said quietly, "was never union. It was a contract signed in despair. You sought obedience. I sought peace. We achieved neither." His hand slammed against the table, shattering a glass decanter. "And now you seek what? The arms of another man?" Her eyes lifted to his, unflinching. "I seek my soul." He froze. For a moment, the sound of rain filled the silence like weeping. Then coldly he said, "Where is he?" She did not answer. The Duke's breath came sharp and slow. "Very well. If you will not speak, I shall find him myself." He turned to leave, but Evelyn's voice halted him. "He is gone." The words hung in the air like a prayer and a curse combined. The Duke turned, eyes gleaming with suspicion. "Gone." "Yes," she said softly. "Gone. Though his presence remains in every corner of this house where kindness dared to breathe." He studied her, a storm behind his gaze. "You love him." It was not a question. "I do." The truth escaped her lips without hesitation, without shame. It felt like freedom, terrifying, luminous, irreversible. For a moment, even he seemed struck silent by her audacity. Then, slowly, his expression darkened into disbelief. "You would destroy yourself for a fantasy." "I would save myself from a life already destroyed," she whispered. He moved toward her again, voice low, dangerous. "You are my wife. I was your prisoner." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist. "Do not test me, Evelyn." Her voice broke, but her resolve did not. "Then release me, Henry. Release me before you have nothing left to claim but ashes." Something flickered in his eyes, pain, perhaps, or the faint echo of what once resembled love. "You would shame me before all of England," he said. "I would rather shame you than shame my own heart another day." For a long moment neither moved. Then, with a quiet exhale, he released her wrist. "You are not the woman I married." She smiled faintly. "No, that woman died the day she became your Duchess." He turned away, trembling with rage he could no longer command. "Go then. Seek your romantic ruin. See how long affection survives against hunger and gossip." Her answer was calm, almost merciful. Better ruin with honesty than survival in deceit. As he stormed from the room, the great door slammed behind him, echoing through the house like the final stroke of a bell. When silence returned, Evelyn sank to her knees, breath shaking, eyes wet, not with regret but release. She had spoken the truth aloud, and it had not destroyed her. It had made her real. Night deepened. Rain turned to snow. Down in the old stables, Lucien waited by the lantern's glow, his horse restless beneath him. The mud was thick with frost, his breath came out in white plumes. He looked toward the house that had both condemned and concealed their love. He had resolved to leave, to vanish into exile before the Duke's fury found him. But every instinct fought against departure. When he saw a faint light in Evelyn's window, he dismounted. Moments later, a soft sound reached her chamber, a pebble against glass. Evelyn crossed the window, heart wild. Below, half lost in shadow, Lucian looked up. "You cannot be here," she whispered, opening the pane. He smiled faintly. "Then let this be the last sin I commit. The Duke will kill you if he finds you. Then I shall die honest." Her tears fell freely now. "You must go. Please." He stepped closer to the window, the snow falling around him like blessings from a cruel heaven. "Evelyn, listen to me. Tomorrow the Duke will send men to ruin my name, perhaps to end my life. But before that happens, I need you to know, whatever becomes of us, I do not regret a single breath spent loving you." Her hand reached down, trembling. He caught it, pressed it to his lips, his voice breaking. "Say the word and I will stay. Say it, and I will fight the world for you." The wind howled. Her heart screamed, yes. But reason, mercy, and fear tangled within her chest. "If you stay, you die. If you go, perhaps I live." He closed his eyes. "Then live enough for us both." Their fingers lingered a moment longer before slipping apart. He turned toward the dark road, leading away from Ashbourne. Each step he took vanished beneath the snow, erasing him even as she whispered his name to the night. "Lucian." He paused but did not turn back. "When a frost breaks," he said softly, "look for the violets." Then he was gone. Evelyn stood at the window long after his shadow disappeared. Behind her, the house groaned under the weight of its silence. Before her, the horizon stretched endless and empty, yet alive with possibility. For the first time in years, she felt the air in her lungs like grace, and as dawn bled across the moors, faint and fragile, the first violet petal drifted through the cracked window, landing upon her open hand, its scent unmistakable, impossible. She smiled through her tears. Far off, a distant sound broke the calm, the gallop of horses, the echo of pursuit. Her breath caught. Freedom had spoken its first word. But at Ashbourne, freedom was never granted without a cost. The snow had not stopped for 3 days. Ashbourne lay buried beneath it, white and silent as a tomb. Within the manor, the fireplaces had gone cold, and the servants whispered that the Duke had not slept since the night his Duchess defied him. Evelyn moved like a ghost through the dim halls, each step echoing in a world emptied of everything but memory. The violets had withered in her hand, their scent faded, but she kept them near her heart. Somewhere beyond the hills, Lucian was alive or dead by now. She did not know. Only the wind carried his name, and it howled without mercy. At dusk, the Duke summoned her to his study. The room was lit by only 2 candles, their flames shaking in the cold draught. He stood by the window, his reflection fractured by ice on the glass. "You've received a letter," he said without turning. "Delivered by a rider who did not wait for coin." She froze. "A letter?" He extended his hand, holding out the folded paper. "It bears the seal of Ravenshade Abbey." Her heart lurched. Lucian had spoken of that place, his refuge, his sanctuary before exile. Trembling, she took the letter and broke the wax. The handwriting was unmistakable. "My dearest Evelyn, I write this not in hope, but in truth. By the time you read these words, I will have surrendered myself to His Grace's men. I do so willingly, not in defiance, but to spare you the ruin of my name upon yours. You once said love is not possession, but protection. I understand that now. Whatever my fate, know that I have loved you without regret. Yours, Lucian." Her fingers went numb. The letter slipped from her hand, fluttering like a wounded bird to the floor. "You see," the Duke said, quietly, even he understood what you would not, "that defiance has a price." Her gaze lifted, fierce and wet. "You sent for him." "I sent for justice," he replied. "What he chose was his own damnation." She stepped closer, the fury in her voice trembling beneath sorrow. "You call it justice to destroy the only man who ever saw me? He saw what was mine," the Duke snapped. "No," she whispered. "He saw what you buried." The words struck him like a blade. His expression faltered. "You think me heartless," he said softly. "Perhaps I am. But understand this, Evelyn, everything I've done, I did to keep what little remained of order. Scandal can devour empires. Love destroys quietly." "Then let it destroy me," she said, tears burning down her cheeks. But do not make it a spectacle. He turned sharply away, gripping the edge of his desk until his knuckles went white. The storm outside deepened, lightning tearing through the sky. Then came the sound, distant hooves pounding against the frozen ground. Both froze. Moments later, a guard burst into the room. "Your Grace, the prisoner, he escaped. He's headed toward the moors." The Duke's eyes met Evelyn's. Something passed between them, a wordless reckoning neither could contain. Without hesitation, she ran. Down the stairs, through the courtyard, across the snow-blind expanse. The wind clawed at her face, tore at her cloak, but she did not stop. Behind her, the Duke's men shouted, their torches flaring like dying suns. "Lucian!" she cried into the storm. The sound was swallowed by wind and thunder. She reached the edge of the moor, her boots sinking into snow. And there, through the haze, she saw him. He was stumbling, blood staining his sleeve, his hair wild, in the tempest. "Evelyn," he gasped as she reached him, his breath ragged. "You shouldn't have come. You shouldn't have stayed." Their hands met, cold upon cold, and for a heartbeat the world disappeared. Behind them came the thunder of pursuit. Torches drew closer, men shouting orders. "Go," he said, gripping her shoulders. "They'll take you too." "Then let them." He shook his head weakly. "I will not let you fall for me again." She smiled through her tears. Too late. The Duke appeared then, tall upon his horse, flanked by riders. Snow churned around him, a vision of judgment and shadow. He dismounted, sword drawn, voice breaking through the gale. "Step away from her, Harland." Lucian straightened, though barely standing. "You have what you wanted, my surrender." "I wanted truth," the Duke said, "but you offer only ruin." "Then look closely," Lucian rasped. "You'll find truth in what you've tried to bury." The Duke raised his sword, its edge catching the lightning. "You would die for this?" Lucian met his gaze, unwavering. "I already have." The steel descended, then halted. Evelyn had stepped between them, her body shielding Lucian. The sword's tip grazed her shoulder, drawing a thin line of crimson across the white of her gown. "Enough," she cried. "No more blood in the name of pride." The Duke froze, trembling, as if the blade in his hand suddenly weighed the sum of his sins. "Look at me," she whispered. "You once said I was yours. Then claim me not by force, but by mercy." For the first time, the Duke's face broke, not in anger but grief. His hand fell. The sword dropped into the snow with a dull, final sound. He looked at her, voice shaking. "You love him still." She nodded. "Yes, but not as I once did. I love him because he reminded me I was alive." "And what of me?" the Duke asked. She stepped forward, eyes soft, voice low. "You taught me what love should never become." The storm howled between them, drowning the sob that tore from his throat. Then, wordlessly, he turned and walked away. His men followed, vanishing into the snow like specters returning to the earth. Evelyn fell to her knees beside Lucian. His head rested against her lap, breath faint. "It's over," she whispered, stroking his hair. He smiled weakly. "No, it's beginning." Snowflakes melted on his lashes. His eyes closed, peaceful, as though sleep had claimed him instead of death. The wind softened. Dawn crept across the moors, pale and trembling. Evelyn pressed her lips to his forehead, her tears mixing with the snow. By the time the first light touched Ashbourne, she was standing again, alone but unbroken. The violet pendant hung against her heart, glowing faintly in the morning sun. The Duke was gone. The world was silent. But within her chest, something new stirred. A quiet, steady flame that no storm could extinguish. She looked toward the horizon where sky met frost and whispered, "I will live." And somewhere, carried by the wind, a voice answered, soft, eternal, "Live enough for us both."